Mark, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right, so the majority of your book, Signs from a Peculiar Institution, describes the roughly 2.5 years that you spent witnessing and praying outside of the abortion clinic, the Northern Illinois Women's Center in Rockford, Illinois. But before we dive into some of those experiences at this very peculiar institution, as we'll learn, could you tell us how you ended up in front of that clinic in the first place?
Okay, yeah, that I ask myself that all the time. But basically, what happened? It was Lent 2010, and some people from my church who were part of a Respect Life ministry there, suggested we go out to this place. And I've heard, at the time, I'd heard some really odd stories about it. Like one of the things that people would always kind of mention is it's sort of the hood ornament of the clinic was a crucifix in one of the higher windows that had a rubber chicken hanging by a noose, um, displayed in this window. Okay, so that was kind of one of the talisman of this place. Its little calling card, if you will. And so they said, hey, we're going to go out there. It was a 40 Days for Life event. And said, okay, great. For Lent, I'd like to do this. And then the night before, that was supposed to be a Saturday. So Friday night, I get a call, and everybody's got conflicts and this and that. And so I'm kind of on my own. And I'm like, well, I'm going. I'm going. And I'd never been out to an abortion clinic. I had very strong views about abortion, um, but I'd never kind of, put my money where my mouth is on this. So I went out, and it was just a wonderful presence. I mean, there must have been 100 people there. Um, and it's a rough area in Rockford, which I guess we'll probably hit on in this discussion as we go on. But one of my hangups too was just this thought of, well, what am I supposed to do there? And now that I've been doing this for like 10 years, I've been sidewalk counseling for about 7. Um, People will come out and they say, what do people do here? And the thought of just praying the rosary, for instance, or praying on a sidewalk outside was just so foreign to me. And anyway, so it was such a great experience. I thought, I'll go again on Good Friday. So I thought, like, oh, what a great Lent. I've done 2 good deeds. So I go on Good Friday, and they were doing the Stations of the Cross, so which is just a kind of devotion where you follow Jesus on the day that he died on the cross. You kind of follow along as it carries this cross, and you say prayers and whatnot. And it was great. I thought, this is wonderful. I went home. Easter was done, and Lent's pretty intense for me. So when Easter comes, it's kind of like a lot comes off my shoulders. So I'm thinking, oh, this is great. I'm relaxing. Friday, I would go. Friday um, is a day that I don't have to go into work. I can work from home. So I don't get up early. I relax. I don't set an alarm clock. And well, the very next Friday, I wake up. It's pitch black. I look at the clock. It says 5:10. And then there's no alarm going off, but that was the exact time I set my alarm for the week before. And without really much thought, I got up, I got ready, and I just drove out to Rockford, and I just kind of knew there was this urgency about the need to go out there every Friday. And that's how I started going. Um, and how I stayed out, it's funny because there are different, you hear things about abortion clinics, and a lot of people, a lot of times, even from ministers and priests and religious, they've got these kinds of dire stereotypes in their heads about people who go to abortion clinics and what goes on there, and everybody's screaming murder, and it's very hostile. Well, that's not what I found. Now, I've seen those people. They just don't last that long. I think it's tough to keep up that kind of hostility and that sort of venting and that uh, yeah, that animosity for long. The people that really struck me were these people who, were there with a living faith. People who would kneel on the ground and pray for an hour and a half. People who uh, would offer their homes to women. Who would sit out there and take every kind of verbal abuse. And so those people, this kind of living faith, were what I think, without even me thinking about this, without doing any calculations on this, they were the people I saw who revealed a totally different kind of faith than I'd ever seen before.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what got me into it.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I've had the wonderful opportunity to volunteer with 40 Days for Life groups across Canada and joining for their campaigns to different abortion facilities. And for a lot of people, this is something like you mentioned that is just kind of a, whether it's during Lent or many groups that I've worked with, it's been in September as well, doing 2 a year kind of thing. And a lot of people obviously have
Right.
difficulty motivating themselves to get out there, especially if it's raining, especially if it's a long haul getting out there. I mean, it's tricky enough for some people to go out if it's only a 10-minute drive for them. And yet you talk about through your book how this abortion facility in Rockford, Illinois, this is like an hour drive from your house. You're waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning on your days off and going year round. This isn't just a Lenten penance sort of thing. This is year round sort of thing. Share with us a little bit about what kept you going week after week after week. You talk about how there's hurdles at times to getting out there, extra cold, extra dark in the winter, all that kind of thing. I mean, Illinois isn't known for its balmy weather, especially through the winter. And so, share a little bit
No,
about what kept you going
right.
so consistently for those 2.5 years there. And then I know that you've been involved in other clinics after that. We'll get into that as well. But yeah, share about that.
Um, you know, Yeah, I've often thought about the difference between, okay, well, if I lived close to a clinic and going versus the drive, but the drive in a way is a time of reflection and definitely a time of prayer. You prepare yourself. This is a tough, it's a tough gig. You're going out there, it's a hostile audience. This is absolutely the worst neighborhood I've ever been in. I mean, there were, in the movies, I've seen women portraying prostitutes approach cars. Here you could see it. First time I ever in my life saw an actual prostitute and one approaching a car was like right across the street from this place. In the book, I talk about a pimp and a prostitute, and it was pointed out to me who they were. And I kind of described that in the book. Go up to the police because they live in the neighborhood, they're going to make a report. So I don't want to like present this with a halo around it like this. Oh, I just had this euphoric feeling all the time. I was in ecstasy when I was there. It was difficult, but going back and forth, driving an hour, actually helped me first prepare and then kind of come down from that. It's can be difficult. I've been to Haiti a couple times, and when you go to Haiti, I mean it's not only a third world country, but it's brutal. I mean, the roads themselves look like the surface of the moon, and the shanties, the shacks that people are living in, and then you come back and you're supposed to live a normal life, right? You're supposed to like think like, oh, which one of my 1,000 TV channels do I want to watch? What do I want for dinner tonight, honey? What are my options? There it's like they're lucky if they get a meal, and so how do you go from one to the other? Well, actually the drive kind of helps me come down and kind of recenter and refocus. Um, And so, but I want to say this about going out. I was just talking to this young friend of mine. She's in her early 20s, and she's a great, faithful Christian, and she's really getting going in pro-life ministries. And she was expressing to me she just can't get any young men, even ones who are in her pro-life group, to come out with her. Okay. And she's so charming. You'd think like, gosh, I think you'd have 10 guys following you out to this place, But I understand that. I mean, I get it. But the encouragement I would give to people is that it kind of goes with what Abby Johnson, okay, has confirmed many times, and that is that just being there, having people clearly there witnessing to this. You don't have to be the sidewalk counselor. You don't have to be stepping in the gap all the time. You don't have to know what to say. Go there. You know what? Bring your Bible. Open it up to a passage that you think is relevant, and you just start reading this and offer it as a prayer. Give it as an offering. And I'm telling you, that matters. Abby Johnson is telling you that Planned Parenthood knows that matters, So, and we've had, at both places. So I've been at Rockford, the book's about that. I go to the Planned Parenthood in Aurora, Illinois, which is, by volume of abortions, is the third biggest abortion facility in the United States. Okay, so, I've had people say, because you were here, or because I saw somebody out here, like I couldn't do this. Didn't say anything to them. I didn't have some magic words for them, but just that presence, God can use that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I actually answered your question.
No, I think that makes complete sense, and I think that knowledge that there, I would argue, I've done so many different forms of pro-life outreach, and there, more than any, you see just how much this is out of our hands and in the Lord's hands, right? That this isn't up to us in incredibly profound words that we're conveying or anything like that, but rather this is in God's hands, and we are being that witness, that presence there, so that they know that there's another option. You talk at length in your book about the role of the free mobile ultrasound unit and whatnot. We'll get into a few of those experiences and factors about about your time there. And I know that Peter wants to dive in with a couple of questions about those experiences. But yeah, I think that makes complete sense. What keeps you going, knowing not only your own kind of presence and knowing that you're having an impact, but also, like, just in my own experience, knowing the goodness of God, that like me just standing here with a sign, not interacting with anybody, and seeing somebody turn around, like that's so beautiful. It's so heartbreaking to see the people who don't turn around, but it's also so beautiful to see those that do. But Peter, I'll let you jump in there with a question about the experience here.
Yeah, you reminded me of something, Mark, that a friend of ours, John Barrows, who ministers outside of an abortion clinic in Orlando, said. He said very similar. It's amazing what God will do if you just show up. Right, and that's something we've heard from people who minister outside of abortion clinics. That's something we see on the streets. Here in Canada, just talking to high school students and university students, going out, having those conversations is amazing. What will happen, when we take that leap of faith and jump out. Now, I'd like to dive into your experiences a little bit in front of the clinic. One of the I guess the things that the media and the pro-abortion industry tries to tell us is that abortion is, it's a sterile, it's hygienic. There's really nothing noteworthy about the experience of mothers. They're just faced with challenging pregnancies, and abortion is one medical procedure among many. Now, was this your experience as well? That abortion is just, the sterile, hygienic, clean thing. Was this something you experienced as well, as you witnessed hundreds of people coming to abort their children at the Northern Illinois Women's Center?
Well, first of all, my immediate and direct and pervasive experience was outside the clinic. Okay, so when you come up to this place, and of course, right, any business, right, any sound business is trying to really manicure that first impression, right? Because what they see on the outside is what they're going to assume is going on the inside, right? They're gonna connect those intuitively. We all understand it. We are all in some way capitalists, right? We understand how businesses work this way. Okay, so when you go there, it's the exact opposite, right? So on the cover of the book, for instance, I've shown pictures, first of all, of the clinic itself, which is at the time was a 112-year-old uh, former school building. Okay, it said 1898 on the front. It used to be called Turner School, and um, it was in I don't want to say complete disrepair, but from the outside it looked like something that homeless people would be squatting in during the winter. I have many pictures of the windows that are like the original windows, right? Or at least maybe if not the original windows, the frames are original. These old calcified, windows with some with blinds in them, some with masks in them. There was like a devil's mask in one of them. There were numerous rubber chickens and nooses. There were these other signs that were so belligerent and obscene that, by the way, all the customers would have to see these things too. This wasn't just like what I was seeing. And things like abortion removes parasites. Some of them I can't read. They're just obscene. Bed bugs in motorhome. Save your mother from the wrath of God. Exorcism removes demons. Rubber chickens convert to voodoo. There were things. There was a picture of Jesus with his middle finger up that said, "Even Jesus hates you." And remember, the clients are seeing this. Okay. What had happened too, and this story, I don't know how much all of this is not in the book, but what had happened is somebody complained about seeing rats outside of this place, okay, to the health department, and so they did an inspection, and they cited them for several violations, which they sort of begrudgingly fixed. But one of the requirements is that they had to have a fire inspection, or a fire drill. They had to have a fire drill. And during the fire drill, afterwards, they had to say who participated and if this constituted all their employees. So on the form, they put all their employees. They said, yes, all the employees were there. Well, they didn't have some of the required personnel. And this is what got things going. And when the Department of Public Health finally went in there, I mean, the place was an absolute mess. There was crusted blood. I mean, they called it a brown substance, but it was clearly crusted blood on surgical gloves. In both of the surgical rooms where they did the abortions. And by the way, this was a place that only did abortions. That's all they did. The autoclave machine. Okay, so the autoclave machine is a machine that's used in medicine to sterilize equipment. Okay, now if you know anything about abortion, you can imagine where the equipment's going here. Well, by state law in Illinois, that has to be inspected. They have to run an inspection. The machine has to be able to run an inspection once every week, so 52 times a year. So according to the employees, and reported on the Illinois Department of Public Health records, they only did it 4 times a year. And out of those 4 times, it only passed twice. So they're using a machine that's supposed to sterilize, it's not sterilizing properly. And the sad thing about it is that the local newspaper, the Rockford Register-Star, even though these were public records, refused to print any of this. So this place did not close immediately after that. So they were still open, operating this way with a kind of impunity, I suppose. And we made signs, professionally made signs that we were posting on the outside to warn people going in. But the newspaper wasn't saying anything to anyone. No newspaper in Illinois was reporting this. And so, it's funny because I had really never seen the inside of this place until recently. Apparently, shortly after it closed, the building applied for historic building status. And so they published, the document, the application for this I found online. I wasn't looking for it. I just happened to find it. And they have all these pictures from inside the old school, right? So the clinic. And they even have a picture with all the abortion equipment. And for some reason, they decided to submit this for this application for historic status. It was frightening. There were some other interesting pictures in there, but yeah, and by the way, when you look inside this building, it looks like a 112-year-old school building that nobody's done anything with. So no, there's nothing about it that suggests safety, cleanliness, the basic, just the basic professionalism of the medical field. Nothing.
You're so descriptive in your book. Again, the book signs from a peculiar institution. One witness's account of a quite ordinary horror. Describing your experience at this Rockford abortion facility. Two questions that I'd love to ask that are on very differing ends of the spectrum. And I'm glad that you mentioned just how appalling the conditions outside and all the news about it. The report that came out about the health and safety stuff, you go into such vivid detail in the book, and it's so good for people to be aware of, because yeah, Peter, like you mentioned, the media is all too happy to find the nicest looking abortion facility and present that on the cover of any story that they're covering. But Mark, you mentioned the signs, and obviously signs are an integral part of your story, talking about these quite outlandish signs that are so often being shared. I think of a display that I was doing in Lethbridge in Canada here. We were doing a display on campus, and the people holding the sign had misspelt the word propaganda, and they said, "Say no to pro panda." And one of my colleagues went over there and asked, like, why are you against pandas? And the guy was completely perplexed, and because he didn't know that he had spelled propaganda wrong. But I know that you get into some very, very good and very interesting detail in your book about your interactions with those advocating in favor of abortion. But there's a theme that I found very, very interesting that I think it's important for especially pro-lifers to be aware of, that so often those who support abortion are characterized as pro-choice, trying to give the full spectrum of choices to anybody who's experiencing a challenging pregnancy. And yet your experience was very much the opposite of this, that those who were advocating in favor of the clinic, in favor of abortion, they weren't presenting a plethora of choices or trying to encourage the mothers who are coming in here to really evaluate their different choices. Maybe share a little bit about your experiences and what you saw with regards to really how really anti-choice those people were in how they funneled people towards receiving abortions as quickly as possible.
You know, you said something earlier too that reminded me of this. I think what most people who either are indifferent towards this, don't bother, or who actually support it, right, either in idea or action, what overwhelmingly, I think what they know about abortion amounts to PR and marketing. You know, and so, you know, when I went out there, I guess I didn't think too much about what to expect as far as where people were coming from. I mean, I was learning all of this, but there was such, basically the owner, or so the owner of the building, just to kind of clarify this for people for this discussion, there was a gentleman named, there was a man named Wayne Webster who owned this building, and he rented space to the clinic, which was owned by a doctor and who Dennis Christensen, and who hired another Dr. Stuart Kearns to work there. And Webster was also hired to do what he called security, which pretty much amounted to trying to mock, harass the people like me, people there, you know, trying to, I don't know, maybe be a little encouraging to women, to offer them some option, to tell the basic, to reach out basically as a human being and said, we'll help you. Maybe nobody else in your life has stepped up at all, or maybe they're badgering you to be here. And that's that's something to get into too. But we will help you. Like and you don't have to figure this out by yourself. This has been figured out. We've helped women many times in all kinds of circumstances, right? And by the way, a few of the women who used to come out there regularly had abortions. One of them had one in this building, and now they obviously through their experience, they've had kind of a conversion and they understand things. But so some of the things like Wayne would do is if somebody would stop their car, right? So basically how it was set up is there was a sidewalk in front of this place and there was a little driveway. And so we'd stand on the sidewalk because that was public property and we could stand there and we try to flag cars down. And if they stopped, we would try to listen to them. We'd tell them what was available. We'd give them some information. Well, Wayne oftentimes, either if he was outside or inside, he would get in the middle of that conversation. So if he was inside, he'd see you on camera and he'd go through his PA system and he would always say the same thing. Driver, you're blocking my driveway, right? Move your car. And one thing I could never understand is after this hostility, these people would just kind of cow and they'd crawl into this place. They wouldn't leave. I mean, what if they said that to you at McDonald's? You wouldn't go into McDonald's. You'd say, I'm going to Burger King. You'd go somewhere else, but that's not what, people who are going for an abortion to do the thing that most of them know isn't right to begin with, who've had to convince themselves to do this. Like they're not in that space. They don't have that kind of, that strength and that dignity to say, no, I deserve better than this. And so, by the way, so you notice, then what happens, I think, is that the businesses sink to the level of the clientele. So first of all, they're pushing them down to begin with. And then if the clients expect less and less, then they'll give you less and less. There was a woman, she was walking into the plant. Now this is to shift gears, Planned Parenthood in Aurora. Young woman, 20, looked delightful. She was wearing scrubs, like nurses' scrubs. She might have worked in a doctor's office, and she was going in. And I thought, like, oh, is this like? Sometimes there are people who get there early because they've got some other business with the place. They're selling supplies. They're in some kind of medical field. So I just said, hey, listen. I introduced myself and I said, when you come out, why don't we talk? And so she did. And she came over, and she was gonna tell me. I think she was gonna kind of defend this place because I was going into my pitch and what they do here, and I said, we talked to an employee recently who quit this place. And by the way, I get to that Planned Parenthood before any employees get there. I pray over all of them as they come in. And I started noticing about 6 years ago that they had a turnover rate of about 8 to 10 employees a month, which is about a third of their staff, which doesn't tell me, right, that that's a good business. And so Maddie, this one former employee, she told us that her and another woman, they just couldn't take it. They left together. They just walked out. She said that they refer to the women who go there as the cattle line. The cattle line. And so I tell this to this woman that I'm talking to now who was there. She said she was there she gets a prescription written here. She goes somewhere else to fill it. And she said, she admitted, I was about to defend this place. But she said, the last time I was here, right in front of me, they were kind of reprimanding this young woman because she didn't have enough money for anesthesia. And they told her, well, that's tough. You're just going to have to get this without anesthesia. So, why people would, that tells you where they're at with this. And when I'm outside, when I'm outside of the Planned Parenthood, it's no different than being outside in Rockford. It's like there are people who will shout, they will scream, they will do anything to prevent you from talking to somebody. I don't understand that, but it's not because they're really pro-choice. And I've told them that. I will have very sober and patient conversations with people and just say, can you just explain to me how it is you're pro-choice, but I'm not, when I'm actually here trying to empower people to know what their options are. I'm not taking money from them. People like me are offering our homes, we're offering our time, we're offering our patience, our minds, our hearts, our bodies, our souls for this cause. But like, you don't really want choice if it's not abortion, and that's, I don't know. I guess it would be slightly encouraging if I encountered even anybody who was out there and said, I would love it. I want what she wants, not what I want, not what this business is going to make money off of, but what she wants, not what her husband is threatening her to do, right? Not what her boss is telling her, not the threats she's getting from her boss, either explicit or implicit, but what she wants. I would be slightly encouraged. I just have never found that.
Hmm.
I haven't found that.
Yeah. And you go into such good detail in your book about so many different examples that show you that very narrow-minded mindset of making sure that women are getting abortions. Not to mention, you go into very good detail in the last day that the clinic was open and how they pumped through something like 40 or a very high number of mothers having abortions in such a small amount of time that it equaled down to like 13 minutes per abortion or something like that, where and you go into this detail of like,
Yeah.
how are you possibly supposed to counsel this mother if abortion's a decision between a mother and her doctor? How can you possibly facilitate that in that kind of a cattle chute system where you just punch people through? One other question, though, and I know that we could go into so much depth about the darkness of these abortion facilities and whatnot, but let's steer my last question on kind of your experience before Peter jumps back in is about. I don't know if it's quite the bright side of an abortion clinic because it's not the bright side, but the people that you're there with who are advocating for life. You share a lot of very, very beautiful anecdotes of interacting with the different people who join you on the sidewalks every Friday. Maybe just share some experiences or thoughts about those people that you really forged friendships with while you were at the abortion facility, and what that was like building that pro-life community amongst people who are desperately trying to protect these preborn children and their mothers.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, there's a lot. There's really a lot to say there. Two of the people that I met initially that I could kind of tell, just by the way they carried themselves, that okay, they're very familiar here. Um, they they have a purpose here. One of them was Kevin Rylett, and Kevin, um, when I started, maybe the first conversation I had with him, I asked him how long he'd been coming out here, and that place was open. It was only open twice a week, but he would come out both days. And if anybody was probably responsible for any level of organization on among pro-lifers, it was Kevin for sure. And so, and he was from Rockford. He lived there. He taught at St. Bernadette's School at the time, which has since closed, unfortunately. But he he said he'd been coming out there for 14 years. And I mean, the idea of me being out there for 14 days was like, it weighed on me. I mean, just coming out there was such a psychological and spiritual um, movement, that was just, there was a lot that needed to happen for that to go on. And this guy had been doing it for 14 years. And I was like, I think in the book, I say something like it sounds like they're doing a sentence in eons, and then, and the other person was Mary Jane Steffen. And Mary Jane Steffen just turned 80. I just talked to her. She called me to talk about the book. And she said something really interesting when I talked to her recently. She said, I don't want the book to end. She says, it's like saying, ending the book is like saying goodbye to an old friend. And that's it. It's like when the place finally closed, about 6 months later, we were all at another, like a Face the Truth tour. Are you guys familiar with Face the Truth? Probably. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So we did a Face the Truth in Rockford, and which we'd all done before together. And so they then there was a luncheon afterwards, so we all go there, and we all talked about how there was a weird kind of depression. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but not having this to do, even though we all wanted that place closed. This wasn't some morbid desire to like go back to this horror. But it was really about these friends that you've made in Jesus, this God bond. Jesus in the last prayer, that long extended prayer, at the Last Supper, where he's talking to his Father, and he says, Father, keep these men, keep them one, as you and I are one. It's like that's what he does here. Like he's creating a church. Eric Scheidler, who I've become friends with because he's out in Aurora. Okay, I mean, I'd met him before that, and his father, the late great Joe Scheidler. Um, uh, you know, Eric said this one thing one time, which is so true, and I love to share it, and that is, out at the abortion clinic, like the ones I've been at, so many others, I'm sure, there truly is a Christian ethos. It's not a bunch of Catholics out there. It's not a bunch of Presbyterians. It's not a bunch of Methodist. It's like a Christian ethos. People, Jesus says it a couple times quite clearly. Whoever does the will of my Father is my mother and my brother. And it's like, these are people doing the will of the Father. In the letter of St. James, it says, I'll show you my faith through my works, right? That these things are connected. They're not separate, And so coming out here, you're seeing this living faith. It's palpable. It's real. It's not a service followed by donuts. It's people out there suffering. You mentioned early on the climate. Well, now I've discovered these wonderful little hot hand warmers that I can load into my gloves. I did not know about those. I would be agonizingly cold, and I have right now my hands are cold. Like I do not have good circulation in my extremities. Don't know why, but it was brutal. And so that's kind of a motif in the book too, that and it becomes an emblem of the kind of the spiritual journey, and some of our spiritual journeys, right? They're difficult. They're walking through that desert, So again, I don't know how far we got away from your question, but
No, that's good. I like what you were saying about the friendships that formed. I think anyone that's listening to this who has been in the battle fighting, against the evil of abortion, whether it be we run some internships here in Canada, but even around the world, fighting against the evil of abortion and doing it with you know some like-minded pro-lifers. I think everyone can relate to the friendships that build and the bonds that form in the midst of those difficulties and those hardships. And those are bonds and those are friendships that last a lifetime. I mean, those are good friendships. And I know, Mark, you highlight a lot of things in your book. There are a lot more experiences that we could touch on. But we will be recommending your book to people, putting the link to it in the show notes. But one of the things we want to do on the podcast as we slowly start to wrap up, one of the things we try to do is emphasize the importance of pro-lifers telling their own story. And we do this because for far too long, the pro-abortion media, pro-abortion industry has been telling, the entire world what the pro-lifers are like, what pro-life experiences are like, and what pro-life heroes are like. And in many cases, the stories that they tell are actually not correct, right? They don't align with the experiences that we as pro-lifers actually have, the friendships we actually form, and the things that actually happen while we're doing the ministry that we're doing. So tell us about why you thought it was important to write this book, to share the experiences that you had in front of this clinic, and yeah, just talk to us about why this book is out there, why you made it.
Well, I think it started as like a journal. And my very first journal entry is like the first vignette in here. There's like a kind of an intro, and then there's like it kind of jumps into basically the journal. And for people out there, most of the entries are dated. I think they all are actually. And and there's an existential reality to that, right? You were just talking, Peter, about how there are these different narratives out there. One of the narratives that almost never gets out there is that this happens to real people. This isn't an idea. I'm a college professor, and I'm surrounded by colleagues who love the idea of abortion. It's like, as an idea, it's like, you should come out with me. You should check this out. You should see what your idea is on the ground when people are walking, through the mud of abortion, what this really is. So, I didn't go out there to write a book. I didn't go out there to write a journal. So the first entry just says, I've been coming out here for 5 weeks now. And that always struck me. It's like, yeah, I wasn't there to write, even though I'm an English teacher. I teach writing. But things were just so beyond belief, beyond my powers to exaggerate or embellish. Now, there's this thing about nonfiction versus fiction. And the funny thing about fiction, even though you think, you can write anything you want in fiction, well, if you're writing, all fiction is kind of stuck in its own rules. Okay, so if I'm writing a fantasy novel, I can't suddenly have a character that's breaking all the rules I've set up in my fantasy world, right? If I'm writing realistic fiction, I can't just have characters doing things beyond what people would reasonably expect. But in nonfiction, I just write what I see. I write what actually is going on, and I'm telling you, it's far worse than anybody could imagine, beyond these convenient, nice, again, PR and marketing narratives, right? The Cecile Richards coming out on the stage of the DNC in 2016, right? Barbie's mother, all made up and polished and looking great. Like, that's not what's going on. That's not really what's happening. So what I did when I wrote this book, I wasn't trying to do what Abby Johnson did. I wasn't trying to do what Father Frank Pavone did. I wasn't really trying to do what a lot of these other great books were doing. We're talking about pro-life arguments, and which we need. We need to know this. We need to know how to handle. I love your show, by the way, because it actually deals with specific ones. And by the way, some of the ones I've obsessed over for years. The violinist bit, right, being one of them. And but I wrote this because when you actually see, when you get out of the way and you just put a camera on this and you show, sort of a written camera of the word, and you show what's going on here, the notions of choice and in female empowerment start to blow up. So one day I'm sitting there, right, and I'm on the sidewalk and praying, and these people didn't park in the parking lot. They parked somewhere down the street, so they're walking to the clinic, towards the Nywick. It's a young woman who looks like she's college age, and then there's a man, probably your dad, who's about 6'4", at least 250 pounds, big guy, and she starts to say something. This young woman, and he, in the most guttural tones you could imagine, just said, "Shut the F up." Of course, it wasn't F, right? And guess what she did? She shut the F up, right? I don't know. You might have to bleep that out of your show. I don't. But there's no choice there. There's no choice. We're not looking at empowerment. We're not looking at healthcare at this place. So I wanted to just like, hey, this is what's happening. This is what's really happening. Sometimes people will stop even now, and they'll want to argue with me, and they'll say. One guy said one time, "Why are you out here harassing women?" So I kept asking him questions like, "Why do you think this?" But I didn't say much, and then finally I had to leave, and so I said, you're clearly misinformed about what I do here. So here's my sincere invitation. I'm out here on these Fridays at this time. Why don't you just come out and stand with me and see what I do? And that's about as honest as I can be about it and about as straightforward. And so that with the book, that's what I was trying to do.
Gotcha. And I'm so glad that you did that because it shares such a vivid experience of somebody who who went to their local abortion, like it's shoes that a lot of people can try on, sort of thing, and share a common experience. We recently did an
Yeah.
interview with Lila Rose and talking about some of her investigative journalism, and obviously I hope that many of the listeners are familiar
Yeah.
with the incredible work that people like David Daleiden do. But obviously the response from the pro-abortion media is often, okay, sure, you pick the worst possible place, and like you're gonna try to condemn the entire industry over Kermit Gosnell, like this is few and far between. And yet sharing your story, we see that sure, you may not be trying to paint with broad strokes on every single abortion facility is like this, but by a pro-lifer like you eloquently telling the story of this is what I experienced, this was my local abortion facility, and this is what happened. I think that's so vital for people to be aware of. And as we start wrapping up here, I'd love to just get a little bit more on where do people find the book? Where can people find out more about the ministry that you're continuing to do? I know that you are now helping out, like you said, at the Aurora abortion facility. Where can people find the book, and how can people get involved in doing similar kinds of witnessing as to what you're doing right now, I suppose?
Okay, so in order there, they can find the book on Amazon. So they have to search me. So Mark Waters. If you put in signs and signs from a peculiar institution, either way, you should be able to find it. And you can get it. There's an electronic version or there's a print version. Most people buy the print version, which I would recommend. I mean, I like a good book, in my hands. But as far as getting involved. Let me say this. I think that's such a common question, and not just about this ministry, but about a lot of other ministries. Do what God's putting in front of you. Joe Scheidler said this. He said, "Do one pro-life thing every day." Okay. Say a prayer. Are you doing a spiritual adoption? Right? Are you, in other words, are you praying for an unborn child like year round? So me and my youngest son and one of my daughters, we do that. I have other pro-life prayers I do every day. Are you learning a little bit about this? Okay. And I'd really like to say this one thing. Monica Miller. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with her. Okay. So Dr. Monica Miller, I heard her talking. I've actually met her, but I heard her saying something in an interview on the radio one time. She said, if this is going to end, it's going to be through the church. Okay. Now, I'm wrapping my head around that for years. Okay. And the thing, from my experience, what I would add to this is, and that's really going to be with the domestic church. So, if for people who don't know what that means, like in your home, you as a mom and a dad, and by the way, you as a teenager who needs to convert your mom and dad, right? Or whatever, right? This needs to start in the home. I mean, I've had a discussion with this girl, and I wanted to pull my hair out because she's she's telling me how Catholic her mom is, and her mom says it's okay to go into this Planned Parenthood. She claims not for an abortion. Everyone there lies to me, so I don't know. And my daughter, I'll tell you this story. It was like fourth or fifth grade. She's standing out at recess, and girls in her school at recess will just kind of stand with some friends, and they'll do a lot of talking most often. And so she's talking, and some girl, like a fourth or fifth grade girl, right, starts somehow bringing up abortion, a woman's right to choose. And, sometimes it's just the only option. So she's going into all the platitudes, right, of abortion. And my daughter, May, who I've not run through all the different abortion arguments and the nuances, she just said, but it's a baby. And the girl stopped. She didn't expect that. She kind of redoubled her efforts and came back. And my daughter just said, again, but it's a baby. And her reaction, by the way, reminded me of Rockford. She just started screaming, stop touching me. Stop grabbing me. This was her react to get the attention. I kid you not, I can't make this up, to get the attention of the volunteer, the kind of the adults that supervise the recess, because she just wanted to get out of it. That girl didn't know what to do. But my daughter, it wasn't like she sat there in a polemical sense, arguing back. She just said one basic truth that she knew, that had been confirmed by her mom and her dad, right? And her God, that life is precious. It's made in the image and likeness of God. You cannot kill a baby and call it good. So, hey, there's a ministry right in your home, brothers and sisters. I can't do much. By the way, if anybody who's listening to this, or Peter and Cam, both of you understand this. By the time somebody gets to an abortion clinic for an abortion, it's tough to talk to them. It's tough to change a mind. It's the grace of God at that point. So what's going on in your home is so paramount, before they ever get there.
That's key, and I thank you for bringing that up. That as parents, as families, we need to raise our children to respect and defend life. But then you also highlighted the importance of not only the importance of ministries in front of the clinics, but also engaging with the culture prior to that. That 11th hour ministry is important, but there are so many opportunities for us to reach people before they make that decision and before
Amen.
they end up in front of the abortion clinic.
Amen.
So you said we can find your book on Amazon. We're going to put a link in the show notes as well. So if anyone's interested, there is a link to the book on Amazon in our show notes. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today.
Man, this was a good time. It's always wonderful to talk to people who get it. So thank you. Thank you really for having me on. I appreciate it. And by the way, just one last thing. I don't make any money from this. I charged as little as Amazon would let me for both versions of the book. They've sent me, I think, $13 in royalties so far, which I gave to the Pro-Life Action League. Actually, I gave the Pro-Life Action League like $50. I don't want to make money. People make money killing babies. I'm not going to make money trying to do God's will in this. It's best as I can. But just so people know, I'm not promoting this book. I'm promoting life, brothers and sisters.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for that, and thank you for your ministry, sir.
Yeah, thanks, guys.